What is going on, guys? Welcome back into another video. Now, a few weeks back, Bungie dropped the variable quest line, which resulted in us getting our hands on the new exotic glaive, Vexcalibur. Now, this is a unique exotic that you can craft, and it also has 3 unique catalysts that you can also snag from the legendary version of the exact same mission. So in this video, I want to go over some tips, tricks, and show you the build that I used and some of the weapons I used to get through this mission solo on Legendary, so you guys can get your hands on those catalysts and craft the perfect exotic for your arsenal. Now, before we get into it, if you're enjoying the content on the channel, feel free to hit that thumbs up and sub to the channel. It definitely helps me out, and I really appreciate all the support. Now, to start things off, the legendary version of the Node Over Avalon mission can be found on EDZ, where the original one is, and it's going to be at power 1830. Now, this does have a couple unique modifiers on it as well, one in which is called Multiplicity, which basically means that greater fireteam sizes scales combatant difficulty and adds limitations on revives. Now, basically that means that the more people you have in your fireteam, the tougher the enemies in this activity are actually going to be. You do gain the ability to have some revives available, because on solo, if you end up dying, you will wipe on some of these encounters, so you do want to note that, but I do think that on solo, this is an easier mission to get through. Now, I do want to note that there are no champions in this mission, so you don't have to worry about taking weapons in that are able to stun barriers, unstops, or overloads. The only thing I'm going to say is that you're going to run into a lot of adds that have arc and void shields, so you might want to base your actual loadout with weapons that are able to take those kind of shields down. Now, in terms of build recommendations and what I used for my build to get through this mission solo, I was actually using the void build that we just covered in a couple videos ago. I'll definitely drop a link in the description below for your guys' reference if you want to check a more in-depth look at that build out. But really what I'm trying to do is lean heavily into Devour. We're going to be using a ton of grenades to weaken and destroy some of these enemies. We're also using Wave Splitter and a Void LMG to take advantage of some of the artifact perks this season. Now, I also feel like there are a ton of different builds that you could really take into this. Warlocks have the Starfire build, Titans obviously have their hammer builds, and I feel like Hunters using that invisibility in this could be really powerful as well. Whichever build you decide to take in, just make sure that you can survive with it and take out a ton of adds, because on some of these encounters, the adds will just endlessly spawn. Now, in terms of weapons, you have a ton of flexibility here. You can really use any weapons that you choose to use, whatever fits your playstyle the best. However, there are a ton of snipers, so I would recommend something with some range on some of these encounters. Also, having a grenade launcher with disorienting grenades to stun some of these Waverns later, we'll get into that here in just a bit, is super important. And also, if you guys have Wishender available, which is an exotic bow, grab that, because we're going to use that on the final boss. Again, we'll get into that here in just a bit. Now, moving into the actual mission itself and the first encounter, which is going to be the legendary Confluxes. Now, this is really no different than it is on the normal mode. However, there are a ton more enemies. They are a lot more beefy, and you do need to be on your toes, because these snipers in this room will absolutely melt you. Now, the key thing throughout this encounter is that every time a new set of symbols spawn, which you do have to input on 3 separate occasions to move through this encounter, there is going to be a new set of snipers that also spawn throughout the map. Now, you'll have to manage putting in those symbols and the hordes of enemies that are also spawning. There are going to be some yellow bar minotaurs, which are a big pain in the butt too, so make sure you get grenades or something down on those quick so you can just absolutely melt them. Now, after doing this for a few levels, you're going to end up running into a ton of adds and a couple of yellow bar Waverns. Now, what I tried to do is I tried to use my heavy and my super on those Waverns, because it's super important to get those down fast, because once they are down, they will despawn all of the enemies and you'll be able to move on to the next encounter. Now, moving over to our second encounter and our first boss fight, which is going to be against the Data Nullifier, and honestly, things do not get any easier here. Now, once you land in this circular room, you're going to want to take out the initial set of harpies that are right there in front of you and get to killing adds so you can collect those motes and get them deposited in the center of the room as fast as possible. Now, once you have those deposited, you're going to want to go ahead and pop down into the hole in the center of the room and wait for that timer to go down. And this is really where going invis or having a GL with disorienting grenades on it is going to come into play. Now, while we're waiting in this hole, there's going to be a couple Waverns that will approach us, because we're really not trying to take these Waverns out at all. We're just trying to sprint for the middle of the room as fast as we possibly can. So if you can hit these Waverns with those disorienting GLs, you'll be able to survive and move on to the next encounter. Now, after a couple rounds of depositing those motes, you'll enter the DPS phase of the actual Data Nullifier, which he does have 2 separate DPS phases on. And what you'll want to do is go to the side of the room that has the most cover, which you can see here in the video. Now, while you're here, you'll have to manage some of the ads that do spawn up behind you. There's going to be a ton of harpies, and I think eventually there'll be a couple of yellow bar minotaurs that spawn up, but honestly, you're pretty well protected from the boss itself, and you can really take your time and peck away at the boss so you can move on. Now, after the initial DPS phase, you'll have to go back out and deposit more motes. While you're doing that, I would recommend that if you can take out snipers in these rooms, I would certainly try to do that because they will absolutely melt you if you're trying to deposit those motes. So try to handle those as fast as you possibly can and get back down to that hole and manage those waverns again. Now, after you've done that, you're going to enter the final DPS phase of the data nullifier. And again, it's just going to be rinse and repeat of what we did earlier. We're going to go to the side of the room that has the most cover, manage the ads that come out of the portals, and slowly peck away at the boss. And once you've done that, we'll be able to move on to the next encounter. Now, this is going to lead us into our final encounter against Brakion, the Repurposed Mind. Now, this boss does have 3 different DPS phases, and each phase has its own set of challenges that we're going to have to get through. Now, in the first phase, Brakion is going to teleport around the room to 3 different pillars that you'll be able to shoot him at. Now, there's also going to be some ads and waverns that will spawn in this room, so you're going to want to take those out as fast as you possibly can. That way you can really focus DPS on Brakion himself. The key thing here is to stay undercover because Brakion's sniper will absolutely melt you. So as long as you stay undercover and gradually peck away at him, you're going to be able to move on to the next phase with no issues. Now, that's going to lead us to the second phase of this fight where Brakion is in the box-shaped shield in the center of the room. Now, this is where we're going to want to throw on Wish Ender and take advantage of the fact that it will absolutely shoot through that shield and DPS the boss when we're really not supposed to be able to DPS him. Now, we still need to manage all of the ads, the waverns, and the cyclops that will spawn up near where the boss is located in the center of the room, and eventually we're going to have to input those symbols, but honestly, using Wish Ender here makes this part a breeze, and you're going to be able to move on to phase 3. Now, moving into the final room with Brakion, and this is hands down the most chaotic of this entire boss fight. The room itself has very little cover, the boss is going to be insanely aggressive, and there's going to be a ton of ads spawning. The easiest way to get through this phase, guys, is as soon as you spawn into this room, turn around to where you spawned in and run toward the big waterfall of Vex Milk right behind you. Now, once you get here, you're going to want to pop behind this waterfall and use it as a barrier between you, the boss, and all the ads in the center of the room. Now, what's crazy about this spot is the boss itself will not come all the way up onto this platform. He's going to stay more to the middle of the room, and all of the ads will basically stay in the same spot that the boss is, so you're essentially safe here, and you can just take your time and peck away at the boss. Now, I also want to note that if you use Wish Ender here and you aim at the waterfall, you can actually see the outline of the boss through the waterfall and actually shoot arrows through this to make this a little bit faster. I did not use this strategy in this video. It's something you guys can do. I ended up using my grenades, my super, and just kind of pecking away at them with an LMG and my wave splitter. Now, after enough DPS and avoiding walking off the map or walking to the Vex Milk because it does hurt if you walk into it, you'll be able to get through this boss fight with no issues and get your hands on the catalyst that you're looking for. Now, to wrap things up with a little bit of patience and the correct builds, I think that really anybody can get through this mission and get their hands on these amazing catalysts for the Vexcalibur. Now, guys, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions that make this mission a little bit easier, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I really value your guys' opinions, so I love to hear what you guys are using. With that being said, I really hope this video helps you guys get your hands on the catalyst you're looking for, and I will check you all out in the next video.